If you choose to call in, our number is 858 or you can go to godradio1.com and you can follow us on Facebook or YouTube. We're streaming. I'm happy this evening to have our managing editor with us, Ms. Latanya West, and we're, of course, with our partner in this effort, Dr. Leonard Thompson. And so I wanted to give both of them a chance to say hello as we get ready to get started. Ms. West?
Hello, hello, hello. Happy to be here and looking forward to the lively discussion.
It's going to be lively. I can
Yes,
guarantee you
yes,
that.
yes.
Dr. Thompson.
Well, good afternoon, good morning, good evening. I gotta get it all in early because there's so much happening, and by the minute the news is shifting, shifting, and shifting. And so, Dr. Warren, I'm in expectation tonight of what hot topic you got. I'm gonna try to hold on and see what the end's gonna be.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll be singing that song too, the way it's going. I want to start off, I want us to start off, get the whole Ukraine thing in perspective and out of the way here because, first of all, our heart goes out to the Ukrainian people in terms of what they're going through. One of my neighbors, several of my neighbors are Ukrainian, and one in particular, her son was in the parliament. And so I've been very concerned in terms of what's going on there with the family. And the people are making a phenomenal stance. I guess close to 900,000 have fled to surrounding countries. But here's the thing that bothers me in the midst of this. With all this humanitarian concern, and we're giving all the support we can, we find out that Africans fleeing the country as refugees are being treated differently than the white Ukrainians. And, like, really, do we have to go through this again? And they're denying them entry at the borders and pushing them off the trains and all of this kind of stuff. And we have international writers who are feeding some of this information to us firsthand as people of color. So this is not something that we're getting secondhand.
Yeah, they have a
And
Ukrainians first policy for
they,
people trying to exit the country.
oh, that's the way they cover
That's
it up.
yeah, that's
Yeah,
how the
Ukrainian first.
Ukrainian.
So I guess you're supposed to show your birth certificate, but if you look black, then you certainly can't be Ukrainian. But that's not true because we know they got some black Russians too.
Hmm.
Okay.
Well, also too, finding out what the African countries' response is as well. In terms of what they're doing to possibly help those students. I know there's some Ghanaian students that were calling out on social media for help from their government. So who knows? I don't know. Who knows what the situation is in terms of what's even possible?
Well, we're going to be monitoring this very closely, and we're going to continue to upload information in terms of what's happening.
Hmm.
And we're all going to feel the pain here. We're feeling it at the pump already. It's amazing to hear people around the country complaining that gas is 3.25, and I'm saying you got to come to California if you think that's high,
Yeah.
because gas is like $5.40 and climbing here.
Yeah, and what's I heard Biden say he's opening up reserves, or
They
just a
have
number
opened up
of
like 60,000
partners.
barrels a day of the
Yeah.
reserves, strategic reserves,
Hmm.
and the other countries in the North Atlantic Treaty Organizations, they're opening up some of their reserves, but
Yeah.
the cartel is very interesting. They went to them and asked them to increase the amount of oil that's being released today, and they said, "Well, we're going to do it slowly," because they're enjoying big profits.
Yeah.
Oil is now at 112 to $13 a barrel, and we remember when it was down to 50 some dollars a barrel. And supposedly today, the president took additional action to hamper the flow of oil out of Russia, because Russia, that's the main thing that they need
Hmm.
right now in terms of oil. We also
And the
saw a
problem.
week for the first time that we know of that we've had a leader threaten nuclear war. And Putin threatened that, and he met with put his nuclear people on alert. And at the same time that we're having this issue with Putin, Of course, China is back there trying to play on both sides of the fence.
Mm-hmm.
America is stepping up its support for Taiwan, and Taiwan is to China what Ukraine is to Russia. So
Mm-hmm.
Taiwan's position is you can't. China's position is you can't do anything with Taiwan, and we've made a commitment to Taiwan. And then China is engaged in all kinds of activity in the North China Sea. They restricted airspace that's international that they have no control over. They are building out in the water their technology. They are building airports and landing strips in the water, as well as equipping them as military bases. So
It's
it's
scary times.
yeah, a lot of stuff is
Scary times.
going on
Yeah,
here,
it's
and
serious stuff.
meanwhile, here at home, we have stuff happening. The first of the three percenters made a plea today in terms of going to court. Over 700 of those people are going to be tried in terms of the attack that took place in on the Capitol for January 6th in 2021. And so that the ball is still rolling. And of course, we now have our first black nominee for the Supreme Court making her rounds and visits on the Hill.
Mm-hmm.
So we got things going on, but we still don't have the Voting Rights Act. We don't have the John Floyd. We don't have the what's the John Lewis.
Lewis,
We
yeah.
don't have the John Lewis legislation that we need. And we got a trial taking place in Kentucky with the officer that fired the gun that killed Breonna Taylor, but he's not being tried for that. He's being tried for discharging a firearm in the apartment building that went astray. So he can be charged for that, but not for the murder that took place. And so we have to keep our eyes on the national scene. While
Mm-hmm.
here in San Diego, in California, we have situations happening where mask mandates are being lifted, and we still have issues in terms of kids in school. And here in San Diego, we have over 100 million additional dollars. We're one of the first cities that the federal government is giving more money to help fight the rent
Yeah.
issue. So there's a lot going on out there, and I hope that we're paying attention.
Well, there is the anti-lynching bill that got passed in the House, for what that's worth.
Okay,
Yeah, that's positive.
okay, that is positive.
Mm-hmm.
Now the question is, will it make it being signed into law?
In the Senate,
Yeah.
yeah.
Because of course we had the president doing a speech yesterday, and I couldn't help but look at Mitch McConnell sitting there and seeing how one man is holding up America,
Yeah.
and having people buy the lie. And let us not forget that at the meeting that Trump spoke at on Saturday night, that of course he praised Putin for his actions. And I hope America can stop and think where we would be if that fool had gotten reelected in the midst of this. Putin would probably be issuing orders from 1600.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that one of the things that we have to take in mind, is that we don't know what secrets have been leaked about America. We still don't know the things that Donald Trump is still have the capacity to share with Putin in his strategy for undermining the West or the U.S. I think that what we have to do is still be vigilant, realize that the door of the White House was left wide open.
Mm-hmm.
Information is leaking like a sieve. And we come to a time in a season that when people were protesting Black Lives Matter, when people were protesting the killing of innocent people and the lives being taken, they had the National Guard, they had the White House and everything else fully protected. But when it came down to the democracy that we say, America the Beautiful, the home of the braves, the patriots, as they called themselves, stormed the Capitol. And no one wants to talk about that young lady that believed the hype and went through thinking that she was untouchable. And when they shot and she went back and she lost her life, still to this very day, they don't even talk about her. And she was from San Diego.
And she sure was.
Yes, she was. And, most of those people, the things that they did because they were white, they tried to excuse them, all right? Now, I spent over a decade on Capitol Hill, and racism was always apparent. when the white farmers came, trekking mud through those marble halls and chewing tobacco and spitting on the steps, the police just steps aside and let them go through there like they were tramping through a cornfield.
Mm-hmm.
The moment the black folks come and they're all dressed and neat and clean in their Sunday best, they line up and follow them like they're gonna steal the bricks or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so it's America is a victim of its racism, and its racism. This whole thing about the right and the extreme right and all of this support for Trump, it's all about what they were saying following the Civil War. If you look at some of the old movies, they talked about we have a way of life that we got to protect,
Mm-hmm.
and they think that the way of life for America is supposed to be white, and it's got too much color creeping into it. And that's what that's the essence of it that they don't want to mention in
Yeah.
terms of what's taking place.
Well, Daddy doesn't want another guess who's coming to dinner moment, because every time that guess who comes to dinner, it becomes the browning of America, and they're so concerned about creating a pure race that was never a pure race.
Well, she's
You know,
not bringing them to dinner these days. She's just staying at home and telling mom and them they can come over.
Well, if I
Yeah.
can diverge for a moment, mentioning the pure race, it made me think of some of the news stories that are coming out now about white people who are finding out that they have a great grandfather who's black. Have you seen those stories recently on the news? There's been a few instances where they just by accident just found out
Yeah.
that, oh my goodness, my grandfather or my mother.
Mhm.
So there's not a lot of purity. Yeah.
No.
Yeah, and the thing about it is that even with me, my great grandfather was white.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying, is white. You know what I'm saying? He's no longer with us. But the reality is, even though I'm of the darker hue, I cannot say I'm 100% African from the African continent. On the West African. Not, I can't do that.
And no
because-
American really can anyway. I mean, we're all a melting pot. We are, but it's the fantasy, right?
Well,
that
it's a
the
fantasy.
far right has of this
Well, you got to remember too that it was in
superiority.
1898 or 1996 when we had Plessy versus Ferguson.
Mhm.
Okay, and they took the light skinned Negro Plessy to test the law in terms of the train.
Hmm.
And the whole decision hung on the idea that if you have one drop of black blood,
Right.
then you're black.
Well, that's to keep people enslaved.
Yeah, and so
to-
and that's made
yeah.
a whole bunch of people turn out being black based on
Right.
that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which is unfortunate. But we've come so far, and I hope that through Black History Month, that some of our young people really took time to look at some of the programs that we had up that show what we went through, like the special that was on the Tuskegee Airmen and the influence that they made and what they went through, and how it took Mrs. Roosevelt to go up with them to make it work, and how segregated the military was. I mean, most of our people, we have people with Black Men and Women United, Dr. Thompson, who served in the Vietnam War, and they served as cooks, truck drivers, and infantry. We had a few that were officers like Colin Powell and some others, but most of them, they held them back for those things, okay? And I remember that when my class got drafted and we went to the training center and got shipped to South Carolina in 1966, and all of us blacks were in the holding camp. They pulled everybody out. I ended up being there like an extra 2 or 3 days by myself, and I'm wondering, why am I here? Where did they go? Truck driver, infantry, cook, valet. I mean, it didn't have nothing to do with whatever your skills were. You were black, and this is where they were sending people. And then when they got to me, they sent me to communications. Okay, and I was like kind of lost there because there wasn't any of us there. It wasn't us there, and yet the people that they had there, they were getting killed so fast that the school
Wow.
was running 24 hours a day, 3 shifts,
Mm-mm-mm.
in terms of radio and decrypting and stuff. Okay, but the racism. This isn't that long ago.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Everything you're talking about did not happen that far
No.
away, and considering everything that's happening now, it's just it.
60 years ago. I mean, they still had colored only signs up. the two water fountains and the whole bit, just
Yeah.
because they desegregated and they passed the civil rights. They didn't take the signs down or the fountains.
Well, the reality is it's like a seed that can lay dormant for years
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
then still begin to bear fruit
when it's
down the
watered.
road.
Yeah,
And so it's so important that, and like you said, when it's watered, and in the climate that we've been in, we've had years of watering, and we're seeing the racism and the different atmospheres being brought back up because of the fact that spirit is being watered. And I tell people all this is that we need to learn how to be unapologetically African American or black. You
Hmm.
know, a lot of times we find in our even with our children, they find themselves apologizing for being who they are and who they were born to. And I think that we need to make sure that we fill our young people up with so much positive that they become unapologetically African American or black. I look at African American History Month, and I look at how we literally change atmosphere. And I mentioned it last week, and I think I shared with you, Dr. Warren, and you remember this. When they had shut down a certain high school in the city, and the students were dispersed all over, there was one high school north of 8 that said that the students that came from the other school caused so much chaos on their school campus that they needed them to go back to where they came from because it was just too much on their campus. And so we as a district began to do a research of how many kids was actually on the campus. We found out there were 2 kids that came from that other high school. And so what they were saying is a high school of over 1,500 kids were being totally affected by 2 kids. So African American kids, if they have that much energy and that much control too. So I guess they went and they used the Bible. They said, well, one could put 1,000 a flight and two could put 10,000 a flight.
yeah,
So they was anointed,
yeah.
to do what they do.
Right. They were. And so let me just remind you, someone was asking for the number again. It's 858-251-6111. 858-251-6111. And so I'm very concerned that here in San Diego, we have a generation of young people who know nothing about discrimination, and so many times in the past 3 decades, the only time they find their way to the paper is when something happens on the job that they
Mm-hmm.
thought they were just like white people when they got hired. And so all of a sudden, you're being treated differently. Now you want the whole world to come to your rescue.
Mm-hmm.
I think that you have to be on your toes. You know, I hate to quote him, but Thomas Jefferson made the statement. He said, eternal vigilance is the price of freedom. And we need to be aware at all times. We can't let people mistreat us, call us out our names,
Mm-hmm.
which we accept, but we didn't let that. We didn't have to have that happen before,
Mm-hmm.
and so we need to get our young people more sensitized because here's the difference between the '60s and now. In the '60s, we were a praying people. In the '60s and before, we were a collective people.
Hmm.
So what happened to one of us, we saw it as happening to all of us. That's why what Jackie Robinson did was important. That's why what Jesse Owens did was important because it was a reflection on the rest of us. But
Hmm.
now we've reached a point where we got young people today who think it's all about them and north of 8 and that they're not concerned about what happens to the rest of us. And that's something that we have to change. And we also have to change our attitude of disrespect for our elders. And this seems to be a generational thing, Dr. Thompson. We've seen it. Even when we were the radicals and the Mau Maus of our days, we were still respectful to the people whose shoulders we stood on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this group today is kind of taking the position that social media is their god and they don't have to do anything. And I think we can't just let that
And
happen.
that's an outgrowth of the society as a whole, and we just suffer more for it, really, as a black people, you know.
Well, let's have a real conversation about this.
Hmm.
um, the outcome of where our children are at today is because of the parents that came before them.
Right.
So many times, and I've heard this, and I'm going to use my own mother as an example. My mother grew up in the church, and when she got older and she had us, there was this whole thing about, I want my children to go to church. So every Sunday, she would drop us off at Sunday school, and she would go home and maybe wash or relax or whatever. And then she would pick us up after Sunday school and take us home, and we'd do something as a family. And I remember doing that for maybe a year. And this is a woman that grew up in the church, was, Kojic to the bone. And then one day, I think either my sister or me asked her, well, Mom, why you keep dropping us off? Why don't you come with us? It was at that point that the children encouraged the adult to come back and get active in church. So there's a responsibility. I call it reciprocal teaching and dual learning. The kids can teach us, but also they have to learn from us also. And it's so important that we understand that we can't say, well, because my mom and daddy forced me to go to church, I'm not going to force my kids to go to church. That mentality has hurt us. See, because I believe that children make better decisions when they get to a certain age range. You understand what I'm saying?
If
Dr.
they have the
Warren?
foundation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That you can't make a foundational choice at 7, 8, 10, and 9.
No.
You know what I'm saying? When you get
Yeah.
18 and you grown, you pick the church you want to go to and everything else, but you don't have a foundation.
And you're gonna go to church. And it's interesting you said that because my church experience was in twofold. Part of it was in D.C. and part of it was in North Carolina. I remember, like you, when my family used to send us to Sunday school. And after a while, we were raising the question. My mother started coming to church, and she ended up getting involved and becoming one of the mothers of the church. And my father didn't come. But when I was in North Carolina, it was understood that on Sunday, there were three things that were going to happen. There was going to be a prayer in the morning before you left. You were going to spend the day in church. If you were too sick to go to church, you had to stay in bed all day. And after church, there was going to be food there, and you're going to be back for BTU at night at 6 o'clock, and the service at 7. And if you're lucky, you might get home by 9:30 or 10. But your Sunday was already accounted for.
Yeah.
And a lot of us, when we got old enough, we got away from that, but we came back to it on our own.
And you
over
still
time.
have that instilled in you. You have
Yeah.
those values.
The foundation.
And I'm obviously the outlier because I wasn't raised in the church, but I did go to a school that was a non-denominational congregational church. And I just being in that experience for 4 years set a foundation for me that I didn't get anywhere
Yeah.
else.
It's an
You know,
important
just
foundation.
service,
It's an
you
important,
know,
and we don't have it
love.
today anymore. Okay,
Yeah.
especially the pandemic. Church attendance now is down, according to the Barna Institute, is down to 47%.
Yeah.
Well, I have to say this because I think that a lot of people are going to use that as a crutch. We do
Use what
have
as a
it.
crutch?
When we say we don't have certain things,
Mm.
we do have it. It might be in a different form,
Right.
but Pastor Warren, you get on and minister every Sunday.
Yes.
Rain, sleet, snow, sunshine.
Yep.
Tiredness. You're still giving the word.
Yeah.
The Bible says that people will. That no one will go without knowing the word or hearing the word or having an opportunity to accept Christ in their life. Now it comes down to the point, will we truly challenge each other to go back to loving the Lord and
Yes.
Savior? Period. We're in a society now that everything goes.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? You see somebody over there, we're in an open relationship. You can come over if you want to. Hey, if he wants another person, hey, I'll try another person too. Let's try it. And everybody's trying everything, and that's why so many of our young people are losing their lives.
Oh,
Try fentanyl. Try this. Try that. And my whole thing, but they don't do the same thing with this try Jesus. Try having a wholesome life. Everybody don't have to pop bottles.
Well, Dr. Thompson, that's a good segue into a big topic that we want to talk about this evening, because, in the past we had Reverend Dennis Hodge on, who is a member of the County Human Relations Commission, named after former Supervisor Leon Williams.
Yes.
We know that we had a situation there where LGBTQ resolution was brought before the body. He abstained. They pushed him as to why. He gave them biblical reasons for his abstention. Because the word abomination was included in the scripture, they took it as hate speech and ran with it and tried to make an issue. We've had Reverend Hodges on here. We had Chairman of the Board of Supervisors, Nate Fletcher here. And, of course, we have this ongoing effort to try and remove Reverend Hodges from the commission because of this handful of people who are sticking with this doing form letters and all over the community trying to get people to sign. And then today we get a story in the UT that's presented as if it represents the city, saying that a group is calling for the removal of Reverend Hodge. And we want to establish clearly here that's not the case. This handful of people with their radical ideas cannot stand up and say they speak for all of us. And we have made the point repeatedly that if you're going to have a human relations commission and you're going to have diversity, one of the first steps is respecting the diversity of opinion that's there. And let us be very clear. Reverend Hodges did not start out attacking the people who gave the resolution. What he did was he abstained. They pushed him as to why he abstained. He didn't have to give a reason for his abstention. That's not required under Robert's Rules of Order. But he gave it, and then they got mad with what they heard, and they wanted to amend the bylaws. They started writing letters to supervisors wanting his removal. And it is still my position that if Reverend Hodge is removed from this commission, then we need to start a movement to abolish the County Human Relations Commission because it becomes a farce when it can't handle the diversity that it was created to deal with. And so I really want that point made, that we're not going to let the story in the Union Tribune that was orchestrated, he gave all kinds of pictures to them to choose to go with the story. They decided to use one of him kneeling in prayer in Chula Vista because he was one of the people in Chula Vista who spoke out when that was the movement to have the drag queens read to the children at the library. And he wasn't the only pastor that came. So we need to not let this stuff sleep, folks. We need to wake up and be just as vocal. And I'm particularly concerned with the black pastors here. I don't think that you should be afraid to speak up. If you follow the word and you follow Jesus, then you need to have the guts to stand for what he says. This is not about political correctness or somebody giving you a backlash or leaving your church. This is about, if you're going to be in this, Jesus wants you to be straight up about it. If you're going to follow the word, follow the word. And we're not going to let this go down without a fight.
Do you know if the supervisors have responded at all? I didn't read that article.
Well, what's happened is, no, they haven't. There's been no movement yet as far as I know, they've written letters and they haven't come back.
I mean, the supervisors responding to that letter.
No, I don't think they have, because here's the catch-22. The way it's structured, the supervisor who appoints the person would have to be the person to bring the motion to remove them. Mm-hmm. And Joel Anderson already knew the position of Pastor Hodges as a pastor before he appointed him. So he's not moving to remove him, and so this gets to be important.
Because last we checked, they hadn't responded at all.
Well, here's the thing, and I want to say this, Dr. Warren, I don't agree with everything that you say.
It's okay.
And Sister Tanya, I don't agree with everything that you say. And guess what? Y'all don't agree with everything that I say.
Right.
And neither one of us have a heaven or hell to put either one of us in.
That's true.
We should be able to be at a point where we can agree to disagree agreeably. And if we don't see eye to eye on a certain thing, like I said, I have become a pescatarian. I don't hate anybody that eat chicken because I used to love some chicken, and some beef. But we are when we make a decision, we believe that everybody should follow suit. And when they don't follow suit, then they are out of order and is now hate.
But, this is a little different. And if I can be real,
Please.
I think when God is put into the conversation, and I'm not, I'm who I am, but I think people get sensitive, they're like, because they're being convicted, really, So I think that adds a whole nother element when the conversation is about God.
Yeah. Well, I think that people, when this happens, feel like they're being judged and condemned.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
That too.
And when they feel like they're judged and condemned, then they want to fight back. But aren't they doing the same thing now with Pastor
Absolutely.
Hodges? Are they not judging him
Absolutely.
and condemning him, although he says that he loves them all?
But they can't hear what he's saying because they're so caught up in their position and feeling the way they feel about what they want for
Then how do,
themselves.
and I just want to say, Human Rights Commission, how do we then heal when someone done called me the N word and it hit me to my very soul, but we're expected to then do restorative practice and restorative justice there, but we can't do it nowhere else?
Right.
Well, I have to remind people this country was founded on God, all right? And
Right.
if people are uncomfortable, that's their problem, all right? It's no accident that our currency says in God we trust. It's no accident that the First Amendment has a freedom of worship clause in there. And I went through this the past 2 weeks in terms of how we got it. And there is no wall written into the Constitution. You had Madeline O'Hare fight to get prayer removed from school, and we know how she ended up. It was a horrible life, but yet the very child that she didn't want to pray ended up being one of the greatest advocates for prayer in his adult life.
Yeah.
Okay, and so we can look back at our country and see a pattern
Yes.
that when we had prayer in the schools and we had certain behavior and conduct, there was an order to it. From the moment we removed it, the hippie movement, everything started going to hell in a handbasket.
Well, we have a caller on the line. Caller,
Good.
go ahead.
We can look back at our okay.
Hello, caller, go ahead.
Hey,
You gotta turn. You gotta
Pastor
turn.
Hodges.
You gotta turn your radio or your feed off because we can hear the feed.
All right. How about that?
Yes, sir. Is this Pastor Hodges?
Yes, sir. How you doing?
We're blessed. How are you, sir?
By the best. We settle for none less. Too blessed to be stressed in this mess.
Amen. Amen. What's your question or your conversation this evening?
My conversation is this. I read the Union Tribune from the reporter that placed my statement. And I'm wishing that this thing can just be over with. However, I would solicit your prayers for the Human Relations Commission and that we would have this roundtable meeting and that the young lady that's pressing it would, I don't know, maybe seek the Lord. And a lot of folk are not where we are, and we can't push the word on people, but we can intercede on the folks' behalf.
Amen.
Well, we're certainly not going to push the word on them, Pastor Hodges, but at the same time, we know from experience that, all good has to do is nothing for evil to advance. And so we need to be vocal. And yes, I see where Ellen Nash, as chairperson, is calling for these community conversations, and I hope that they will be real and meaningful when they take place. But we have people with a history in this community that when things don't go their way, they decide that the rest of the world has to stop and get to where they want it. And we're not obligated to do that. So that's our problem. We have people, California, the Western region is one of the places that wanted to take God off our currency, if you will.
I know.
This is a place that wanted to take the cross down that we have up there at Mount Soledad.
Mount Soledad.
And we had to transfer it into a nonprofit and go through all kinds of changes. These are the same people that would want to take those thousands of crosses down at Arlington and every military national cemetery. And yet the crosses are there where they belong to the Star of David or if they're Islamic. Those symbols of their religions are on those issues. And so we cannot let people misrepresent what the word says. The word says that Congress will make no laws abridging the right of religion. It does not say that it will let you impose your religion on everybody else because you don't want to hear about it. And I think we have to. So I'm not sympathetic with her complaint. That's her personal problem, and that's the problem of the people who feel that way. But we have a right to have an opinion, and it doesn't have to be sanitized by their approval.
That's right.
Well, one of the things I'm thinking, Pastor Hodges, thank you so much for your call.
You're welcome.
One of the things about it, they're going to be having these conversations. I believe it is March 9th at 4 p.m. at the Malcolm X Library.
Yeah, that's the first one.
48 Market Street for those people that are interested in having these community conversations. I think the thing about it is simply this, and for so many times we've been seeing the civil rights movement being lumped in with the gay rights movement and trying to make them one and the same. And again, there's this sensitivity because when I wake up in the morning, and I'm not trying to ask anybody to be empathetic with me, but when I wake up in the morning, I'm a black man. And when I go to bed at night, I'm a black man. I cannot choose to be anything other than that because I am identified by the color of my skin. You know what I'm saying? Now, I can choose to be a black man, or I can't choose to be a black man, but I can choose to be a gay man or a transitional person, a trans person, and make those decisions. And I'm not saying make those decisions, but no one else could know unless I tell them. You feel what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
But so when people try to compare the civil rights movement or the plight of the African American to people that have this other lifestyle, it's unfair because you could have that lifestyle and never be identified unless you choose to be.
Well, in addition to that, Brother Thompson, let's be clear that most of the language that we had that outlawed race as a factor also carried the language gender and all of those identities that were known at the time. See, here's what a lot of people miss. The civil rights movement was not the same thing as the gay rights movement. And part of it was based on two things. First of all, the civil rights movement was faith-based in terms of people and prayer. Okay, and so that was a very serious issue that we had there. But the founding people in the movement took the position that you can choose to be what you want to be, but those of us who experience the discrimination of being black, we are born that way and we have no choice. Other people who choose at the time whether they're going to be gay or whatever they want to be, the old school idea was you had a choice, but the government didn't stop you. Now we made some progress for people. Okay, we had the partnership act that was created because people were living together like Golden Girls, and they were family to each other. And yet, by law, they weren't able to be in the hospital or do whatever kinds of things needed to be done. So we've made progress with that. But we cannot go to the next step and just decide that we're going to change everything. It is easier to have an LGBTQ club on a high school campus than a Bible club. And that shouldn't be the case.
No.
If you're going to have that, you ought to be able to have a Star David Club and a Nation of Islam Club, and you can have all of that because the word says make no laws of bridging. Doesn't say outlaw. Make no laws of bridging or
Right.
interfering with the right to worship.
And here's the thing, and let's just have a real conversation. I don't know anybody in America, and I'm just saying this my opinion, that does not have someone that is gay or trans or somebody in their family. We love them no less. They come to our family outings, they come to our churches, and we love them and we appreciate them and we welcome them in just as they come. We're still going to believe our belief system that we have, but we do not mistreat them or, prejudge them. That's between them and God.
And that's
We,
a very important point, Brother Thompson, because I have gay people in my family. We don't ostracize or outlaw them. They are welcome, and some of our friends, like to say, some of my best friends are black. Some of our best friends might be gay, but this is important. The God's whole concept is for people to have a choice, and He doesn't hate the person. He has a problem with what He's identified as the sin. And the sin is the disobedience to what He said the way He wants. But you're not obligated. You are free to choose. That's the beauty about how He created us, that we have a choice. And it's just like somebody wanting to argue abortion. I'm not going to argue abortion with you. If you approve of abortion, that's between you and God. That's not my issue. You can take it up with Him when you see Him and see how it goes, but I'm not going to argue it for you, you see. So that's the way we have to be open-minded so we don't let people put a hate thing on us because we have a disagreement with them.
And that's just utterly ridiculous to hate the hate label.
And it's not hate,
It's
because we all know,
ridiculous.
who knows hate better than black
It's
folks?
serious.
Yeah, and you know, again, words hurt, but words can also heal. And sometimes we'll use a word and we'll say, well, he used the word abomination. He read the word abomination. It was not something that he
Yeah.
created up. He didn't create a word just to hurt somebody. He was just reading scripture. And that's the thing that really concerns me. And then I think the reason why it's so important for us to begin to have these conversations is because there are a lot of people that are not LGBTQIA that feel like they're being bullied into putting pronouns behind their name. And if you don't do that, you're making a judgment call on where you stand and everything else of that nature. And that's also unfortunate. So when we
I
start
agree.
talking about bullying and hate speech and things of that nature, we have to say, but do we want everybody to conform to our belief system, but we don't want to accept them for their belief system? You know, and that's the thing that I say, and this is just for me, that we as Christians have opened the door up to not being taken serious because we've been so busy trying to assimilate to everything else that they don't even see us as Christians. It's like when you see the Muslims, you know they Muslim. You know what I'm saying? Not just by the way the way they carry themselves or what they have on, but they're 5 times a day praying, the way they eat and all the other things. You know, it's hard sometimes to even know who's Christian and who's not because we're so busy assimilating. And we have to now come to a point to say, who are you? Are you that lukewarm Christian? Are you that on fire Christian? Because see, that on fire Christian still loves. You know what I'm saying? And it will meet people right where they're at. And my whole thing is that would I have done it differently? Maybe. Because my whole energy is, for me, I would have said, look, I don't agree. And my thing would have been, I've abstained,
And that's it.
and that's it. I'm not
That's
going to have
it.
a conversation
Yeah.
with you because I see the setup. You feel what I'm saying? And sometimes people want to set it up to set that up. And I want to say this, and I know that this is going to come off a little way, but I want to say it this way. I believe that it's being received the way it is being received because he is of a darker hue with a baritone bass voice, and he seems to have that, you know, I'm not afraid of anybody, but, you know, he grew up in Chicago. You know, that's a real Chicago, and that's that energy. But if he would have cried, and if he would have said, you know, and everything else, then someone would have said, oh, he feels. But my whole thing is that sometimes people use tears as a facade
Oh,
for empathy.
The Eldridge Cleaver
But I
thing, huh?
think also too, sometimes people just don't get it. I mean, you can't even talk reason to someone who doesn't get
Well, they don't want to get it.
it.
You know, you have to remember.
But they're not capable. They're not
Well,
capable.
they used to teach this in logic, and a lot of these people obviously never had it. Logic says that you can always argue with what a person thinks, but you can never argue with what they believe. That's why we have that saying that angels rush in where rush in where angels dare not go, because angels know better than to go in where fools go. You know, before we move the topic, I just want to remind people of a couple of things. That first of all, Christ was not a Christian. All right, and it was about our goal is to be Christ-like in terms of what we live and how we live. It's all about choice. If you don't choose to, you don't have to. But don't try to force somebody else to be where you are just because you're uncomfortable. The word comfort does not appear in the Constitution. I want to remind people of that because we got this thing. There were certain people, well, I'm not comfortable with this. Nobody said you had to be comfortable. Nobody said you had to be happy. The language says that you're entitled to the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness, that you can go after it, but it doesn't guarantee you that you're going to have it. And so we need to just cut through the chase and we need to pick our battles.
Yeah.
We don't want to get so distracted with this that we miss it. Now, on the 31st of March, there is a town hall meeting being held with the district attorney to deal with hate crimes and the number of instances where it's up, especially in terms of African Americans. Because so far, the whole focus wants to put the hate crime argument on Asian Pacific Islanders. But we're still being the victims. And we're the same people that law enforcement has refused over the years to identify the crimes that were hate crimes because they didn't want to do the paperwork to turn it into the feds. And so, we just got to be real that we're not going to have selective hate going on. We have been the victims and we still are, and we will always be because our complexion gives us the high visibility. And everybody else, if they lighter, they can be absorbed, they can change their last name, and they can do all kinds of stuff, but we're going to still look black. The only
And our
difference is
history in this
accent.
country and how we've been treated in this country. I mean, that it doesn't just go away all of a
No,
sudden
it
because we
doesn't.
haven't dealt with it.
And
We
even
haven't
though
dealt with it in
we
so
have
many
reparations
ways.
on the table, people don't want to see
Yeah.
reparations for us, but yet they did reparations for the Japanese
Japanese.
following World War II.
Well, I mean, construction is where it all broke down, right? We know after emancipation, there was no commitment to
No,
really
Well,
correcting the wrong. So,
I want to, maybe we should do our own little litmus test. Maybe I should be Leonard Goldstein, yeah, after Whoopi Goldberg. Maybe I should change. She was from San Diego. Maybe I should change
that's
my
right. I
name
forgot about
to
Yeah.
that.
Leonard Goldstein and see if it win me an Oscar.
I
You
don't
know,
think it will,
Yeah,
Leonard.
you don't think?
No.
Okay. See,
Not unless you're going to do Cabin in the Sky and play a
okay.
role in it.
Yeah, see, the thing that I'm saying is simply this: is that some people have had to assimilate it. Some people had to change their names, and
Yeah.
because she said it so confidently, Whoopi Goldberg, that nobody ever questioned that her name wasn't Whoopi Goldberg, and not Karen, who was working at the City Cafe. You know what I'm saying?
Yep,
And going
Golden
through,
Hills.
exactly. So, but my whole thing at the end of the day is simply this: we can agree to disagree. And we don't even have to like the disagreement. But here is the thing that people need to understand. This conversation is not just happening between gay and black folks. It is happening within the black community with black people. And we're still dealing with the conversation, and we're going to continue to deal with the conversation. So this is not something new.
And
No.
there's discrimination within the gay community where black people are concerned. So all of this, we can't just selectively pick a piece and say, oh, I don't like this part or that part, but when it's there, period. But Dr. Thompson, and time-wise, I don't want us to miss getting to another very important topic tonight,
Okay.
and that's the one about the superintendent selection and what was supposed to have been a community forum that took place last Saturday at Woodrow Wilson Middle School. Yeah, and it's really sad, and we have an article about that this week in the paper,
Front cover.
where people were sitting there social distancing and the questions were being raised, but what you didn't know is that most of those questions had been submitted online and sanitized and handpicked. And if you just went by what you heard there, you would have thought it was a nice little friendly thing. But there were hard issues that were not addressed there. And so the Voice and Viewpoint took a very special position this week and endorsed Dr. Lamont Jackson for superintendent because I'd rather have somebody homegrown who knows San Diego, who came up through the ranks and went to school here, than someone coming from the outside that's got to have a GPS to get around and trying to find the schools that meet. The school district that they're from is smaller than any of the regions that we had here in San Diego. And we have the second largest school district in the state. So this is very important stuff. And my endorsement is not to be taken lightly because not only am I a former school board member, but I'm a former director of the National School Boards Association with 90,000 school board members throughout this country. And I served on the very committee that wrote most of the education legislation that we're following in our schools. And so my position is a very serious one, but we need Dr. Jackson at this point, and we make the point that he has inherited the mess that Cindy Martin left. And we know the pattern in America: when it gets messed up, put a black person in charge and let them take the fall. And so, we're in a deficit when other people aren't, but we're going to stay on top of this thing and make it work.
Well, one of the things that it looks, unless something miraculously happens, it looks like he will get the position. As an educator in San Diego Unified School District for over 34 years, it is yet to be determined and yet to be seen if he will be unapologetically black and unapologetically a leader and make decision that is going to be for the betterment, like they say, for all children. But when you have children that are so far, the gap is so wide, that's like the pandemic. We had to focus on areas and get it. We need to make sure that black and brown children are given the opportunity to close this gap. And that means that there's got to be some courageous leadership that takes place by this new superintendent. And the first thing that he needs to do is he needs to clean house. He needs to clean house of all that dead weight, all those administrators at the what we call the Pink Palace. They got all these people up there. They done bought a new Pink Palace. So all this dead weight that they have around there that's holding titles and all these big jobs, he needs to clean house and bring in people that truly have the heart for the city and the community and not just the title. That's what I'm expecting from Homegrown, because you watched it from the time you were here to now. And if this superintendent cannot make those changes, that means that we are doomed, and we might as well go and look at the charter system as a whole.
But
Go ahead.
there's the community's role too, though, to keep him accountable and to speak out, ask those questions. Go to the community forums, whatever. The community has its role to play as well.
Well, let's see, because I want to say this, because Cindy Martin, when she was superintendent, refused to meet with the community.
But then we demanded, right?
She did.
We make a
And
demand for
let
it,
us
right?
for people who don't know, he is the second black superintendent of San Diego Unified and the first black male to be superintendent. Because the first black superintendent was Bertha Pendleton, who likewise had been in this school district some 40 years before she became superintendent. And we think that she did a good job in terms of what she could do. But we got the generation today, Brother Thompson, we don't even know about the Collins report or what we've been through. The group that you were a part of, the restoration, what was it?
Race, Human Relation, and Advocacy.
The Race, Human Relation, and Advocacy. He needs to reinstate that.
That was abolished by Cindy Martin.
Yeah.
And the
that
money
was hate speech to me.
Yes, it was.
Abolished.
And where did she take the money? She took the money from that and gave it to the LGBTQ community program that she set up.
And
why
a new program
one
called
instead of the other? Why not both? We could have both. What's wrong with that?
Well, she didn't want both, and it was at that time that the vice president, who is the one puppeteer right now, Barrera, over what's taking place, he came to Black Men and Women United and told us that black people were no longer a priority in terms of the school district, that it was all about the Mexicans at this point.
So we just disappeared.
Well, he proved his point
We're not here
because
anymore.
all of the people that work with Dr. Thompson and the Race Human Relations entity, they found new positions. The ones that were Hispanic,
They were given
new positions, and yet his position was not only abolished, but she refused to put him. He was downgraded, and she refused, and that was part of her MO.
But let's be honest. And the people who she worked for, the board of education, that is Richard Barrera, Sharon Whitehurst Payne, their one employee, they said refused to meet with them on this. And after they knew that she was doing this purposely, they did not take charge. But when Cheryl Hibbling had an issue, they immediately called an emergency board meeting and required Cindy to put her back in her position. That is the thing where I say we have to learn to be unapologetically black. We have to learn to understand that if you're in a position and you're representing a district, represent all people, not just because if they supported your campaign or not. And so there's a lot of petty things that have happened over the years within San Diego Unified School District that has gotten our children to the state that they're in now. We have to change that. We're hoping that this new superintendent will lead that charge and do the right thing. But if not, he can be replaced.
Because it's serious business. We've got children's lives, their futures at stake.
I don't want to rain on the parade, but I got to say this, that, this is the second largest school district in the state. There's 65 different languages spoken in San Diego Unified. All right. So that's an issue in itself. And that's the kind of issue that frustrates parent participation, because they're uncomfortable coming to the school and getting involved in the school. And then we have teachers who are not receptive to the parents, and the parents come in hostile because they're defensive, and the teachers get defensive. And so I had to remind people that this is why we had the district attorney's office create the task force that was established for the specific purpose of taking parent complaints in terms of school personnel where they were being treated in violation of the job that the people were hired to do. And we have to stay on reminding people of these things, okay, to keep this, keep it ever in front of them.
Yeah.
I can definitely say, growing up, I didn't get the phrase "the struggle continues." It was like, what? It continues? What do you mean? We've gotten so far. What's this about? But now I understand. The struggle continues.
Luta Continua is still with us, and it's still an important piece because they keep changing the rules. You know, today, when you think back how we fought through Brown versus Board of Education, we had busing to try to bring equality in terms of giving educational opportunity to our kids. I remember when Adam Clayton Powell put the Powell Amendment, Title V of the Title VI of the Civil Rights Act in place, because we had schools in the South that when they integrated, they put the black kids on the second floor and the white kids on the first floor, and they were still segregating them. So the busing was, we're going to put the salt and pepper in the same shaker, and now you can't get rid of one without the other. And that gets to be a very important part of what's happened so far. So now it's no longer about race. Now it's become economic.
Yeah.
Now we got the charter school situation, and we got all of these other elements that are impacting, and the public schools are going to end up and are ending up being a dumping ground.
They already are in many
They're a dumping ground
instances,
for those who can't go anyplace
depending
else.
on your zip code.
Yes.
Well, and also in the charter schools, accept who they want, and if they don't like them, they can kick them out, and they're
Right.
forced to go back.
After they
And
take
the
the money,
Exactly.
and
Right.
then the money stays with the school,
And
but it
without
doesn't
the
go back.
standards, too, the charter schools,
Oh, yeah, they
without the
have
standards that the public schools have,
Yeah.
It's a big
it's
deal.
something.
And
as
so,
a-
I will say this, Dr. Warren, whoever's the new superintendent, I would love to invite them on the show, to let them be able to successfully use this platform and see if they're going to take advantage of it. Number two, for the public to hold them accountable for what they're doing. And when we get a real representative from District E in on that on the diocese, we will see the needle move.
Well, let me tell you that we already had Dr. Jackson on this program back in August. He was on the program along with the county superintendent of public instruction as we talked about the mental health of our students going through this whole period. And he was one of those people that we raised real questions with because we don't have the counselors that we need. We don't have the school nurses that we need. And we still don't have the aides that we need at this point. We don't have the black mentors and role models that many of our people from Black Men and Women United in past years came and volunteered and were driven away from the schools, didn't want to let them come in to work with the kids for any reason whatsoever. So there are a lot of things that we're going to put before him that we're going to be pushing him to restore. I'm glad we have new election process for the school board, and that means that people like our present representative will not be able to get rubber stamped back in if she decides to run again, because now it's going to be district-based, not at large the way it was a runoff, and then all she has to do is worry about north of 8 and everything is safe. So that's not going to be the case. Yeah. So we're making some progress.
And I think that we have to continue. And I want to say this to everyone. We're having these real conversations because they're really happening not just in the San Diego community, but they're happening in communities all over America and throughout the world. Your voice is important. We have these forums to have dialogue and conversation. Agree or disagree. If you can talk about it, eventually we can get to some form of resolution to either be able to live together and disagree or to agree and walk as one. Dr. Warren, your final words.
We want people to remember to be prayerful, to stay vigilant. I want to continue to acknowledge the outstanding job that LaTanya is doing in terms of sorting through and bringing the real news and information to us, because our news is important. I always tell people that news is neither black nor white, but it's the perspective that we bring to it. We want to encourage you to pick up this week's Voice and Viewpoint, either online or hard copy. If you're buying a copy from a stand, please don't take multiple copies. When you steal from us, you steal from our ability to deliver. And so we're under attack out there. There's one group that's marking up our stands. There's one group that's kicking in the windows, and there's another group that's stealing the papers. And we're losing like 40% of our distribution every week between those three elements. But we're going to continue to put the paper there. And if you see the theft, then let us know. Take a picture. We want to continue to deliver, and we thank you for the support.
With that being said, thank you, Dr. Warren. Thank you, Ms. West, for coming on today. It has been a very vibrant show, and look forward to next week. Hope you'll be back with us because, boy, you add that element that we need right here on GLD Radio 1. This is from the Dust of the